Good morning.
Morning.
Here we go. Tuesday morning, conscious conversations. I feel like I was just sharing with Nikki before we hopped on that I feel like we touch on this topic at least once a month. And Nikki was like, well, it's really because this is relevant every single day. So it's really good that we touch on it every single month. But we're talking about navigating tough conversations and how we can just do that with more care and compassion and consciousness. And the way we're going to break this down today, first off, welcome. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining
Happy
us.
Tuesday.
Um, Secondly, I would love to invite you to consider like, is there a certain person or topic that just really gets you jacked up? That really, whether your response is like, oh, I'm going to argue with this person, or whether your response is, I'm just going to ignore them or whatever it is, I think it's, not that I want to piss you off at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, but I think it's helpful for us to think about like, what would that be for me? And yeah, I guess we could start there, and then I want to dig into like why, where the hardness of conversations come from. But Nikki, is there a topic that like, if I were to bring it up right now, or a person, not that you have to say their name, but is there something that could get you pretty fired up?
Yes, and that's why I was saying that this is so good to have different angles of navigating hard conversations on the regular. I
Yeah.
think for me, it's just this politically charged world where people are so present with their strong opinions and they forget to listen to others and respect others come from, and then they're mixing it with religion and politics and that world right now, because we all have so many people around us with these deep relationships, and we have created a space to be able to have these conversations. But then when the world is charged, dang, it's tough to love each other through it all and be our
Mhm,
best self. You
mhm,
know, that's the
mhm.
one for me.
I think that's the piece we're always weaving in is just this consciousness of ego, and ego has to be right. Like, I have to be right, and therefore you need to be wrong, because wrong is a threat to ego. And so ego shows up in a lot of those areas where our right, it feels dangerous not to be right, so in our politics, for some people, it feels so dangerous not to be right. Therefore, ego is very present as a means of protection, and ego hooks ego. So if your opinion is different than mine, wow, what a threat to me and my safety and my identity. In religion, my God, people base their whole like, what's the point of my life? And I got to die well. And, if people are really surrounded by a religion and those beliefs are so hardwired, then of course they're going to protect them fiercely. And it can be no other way, because any other way would say that might mean your way is wrong. And yeah, how terrifying that is to the ego. So
Mm, yes.
it's fascinating. And I think when we break these down, by the way, I'll be transparent too. It's the same for me. Like, it is, um if I hop online and I see just like somebody who is so like lacking compassion,
Hmm.
a lack of compassion, thinking they're better than other people, thinking others deserve less because they're different, like that will really get me going. But then I recognize, like, oh, there's my ego, because I am meeting lack of compassion with lack of compassion. Look at that.
Hmm.
I am meeting their anger and frustration with anger and frustration. Look at that. But you know what? Mine feels so much more justified.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
so much more righteous in mine?
Yeah, and Amy, as I've been going through this version of tough conversations for myself, the word that keeps coming to mind for me is remembering the power of duality. That's the word, the duality of I can love you and disagree with you, and
Mhm,
I can be right and still have something to learn. Like, I don't have to challenge my belief that I believe is right, but it doesn't mean that I can't learn something else or understand your viewpoint.
Mhm. Mhm.
This duality thing is my theme right now.
Yeah, I love that. There's a visual that comes to mind for me, and I know we can't see each other, but I imagine. So, okay, here's what I'm doing right now, guys. Just let's see if I can walk you through it. I have both of my hands up, and they are equal to one another. And so what I start to think in my head is that if I am challenged by someone, this could be in my personal life, it could be in my work life, it could be, in social media land or from the news or whatever. If I if I meet them at the exact same level, I cannot see the situation clearly. And what I'm really doing is creating a tug of war, right? So back and forth between who's right and who's wrong. And so, in order to be able to navigate challenges with more consciousness, we have to be able to rise above. And so, what I'm doing now is I've got one hand just a little bit higher than the other. When we rise above a situation, we can see it from a new and different perspective. We cannot see all angles of a situation from the exact plane in which that challenge starts. We just can't. We're blinded to so many things that could be, when we meet it at its equal. But when we meet it at a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of curiosity, compassion, love, understanding, I can see it so much differently, which means I'm able to bring something different that doesn't exist. Like, you can't solve problem. This was Albert Einstein said this. You can't solve problems from the same energy that created it. I'm ad libbing there, but we can't solve problems from the same consciousness that created it. So it requires a higher, greater consciousness
Mm,
for us to see it more clearly.
no, that's
So
so good.
something to challenge ourselves with. But conversations here's something that's interesting is when something feels hard, to know that hard is a personal definition that we carry, and that it is attached to some trigger that we carry around with us day in and day out. And that trigger is then hit by some external event that happens to just, kind of reveal itself to us. But those triggers, weren't they weren't put there by someone else. That person didn't magically, like, infiltrate your body and create this aspect of being frustrated or pissed or angry. Like, no, you've been carrying that with you. And so it's happening when our version of hard gets hit, is that it's likely hitting one of these three areas. It's either threatening our identity and who we think we are. It's could be threatening our values and what we feel like is right or wrong or good or bad, or it could threaten our security. And security it's a part of us being human. We have to belong. It's, belonging and approval and respect. It goes, I mean, that's a part of like surviving, within your tribe. Like, it
Mhm.
is very deep hardwired within us. So identity, values, and security, when we're dealing with something hard, that's normally one of the three things that it's attaching to. And by the way, the identity piece, I think, goes into our worthiness. you know um, I have not always been good at receiving coaching, and still there's times that I will push back, and that's because, it feels like a threat to my identity. I may not be consciously aware of that, but you know that's certainly something that comes up for me. So with those three, Nikki: identity, values, security, do you have one of those that comes to mind, of just, the thing that might either push your button, or the thing you're the most aware of within yourself?
Mm. Without completely knowing the definition of these, I'm gonna go into values because it leans into just the like when you were saying earlier something about getting charged up when you see someone's not compassionate for someone else, like this is the way, and whatever, and they're just not seeing to be compassionate. I think of that my values are probably what charge my emotions so much.
Mm,
And one thing that I forgot to share earlier that I've been learning in this duality, in case it comes up again, I just don't want to forget, is replacing but with and in conversations. Just
mm,
wanted to, that is such a wonderful tip. I've been trying so hard. Like, I can be clear and stand for my values, right? And I can be a listener and curious. It's not a but trying to prove my way,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So I
good.
would say in this realm, like my values of you know, care for others, kindness, um, you know, empathy, like those kinds of things. I think those are probably the ones that'll get me going faster than others.
Well, let's look at those. So security, values, identity. By the way, as your friend, I do know like values are strong for you. I do know that like yeah, I can see that reflected that you're really good at protecting those, you know. And I like that you're moving into that duality piece of it. I don't know. Can you hear Leap in the background? Can you hear the dog in the
I
background
can
going?
hear a little squeaky toy, yeah.
He's absolutely going crazy over his new Costco toy that his pirate chicken that his dad bought for him at Costco. He's kind of like a toddler, you guys. Like anytime I'm on a call is when suddenly he needs all the attention in the world, you know? So
We're glad he's with us.
he's with us. Yeah, he's here. He's hanging out. He's going to make sure he's heard. So, the the first piece, let's go into work related, and I think this is helpful for all of us to reflect on. Here he comes. He hasn't squeaked that thing in 2 days since we got it. It is so. The first thing that I would love to reflect on is all right. When it comes to feedback, accountability, feedback, accountability. What's another area? Changes, like role changes. How do you respond to that? Feedback, accountability, role changes. Is that something that this is good for our audience? I'm encouraging the audience to reflect on. Is that something that you're like, oh, I am great at that? I love feedback. I love accountability. When changes happen, like I'm all in. Or does any of that ever feel like a threat, or like maybe you've upset someone or you did something wrong? I think that's really, really helpful to reflect on. Nikki, you're really good at feedback.
Mhm.
You're really good at accepting feedback. Have you always been that way, or does it ever trip up a feeling or emotion internally?
I don't think it's a natural, like, wow, I was born to be able to accept feedback well. I remember it was one of the first teachings in my initial year of coaching, when I was, I don't know, 25 or 26, and I hired my first coach. And this concept of feedback is such a gift. It's so hard for others to give it. And when they really know you or take the time to see the thing and then give you that opportunity to learn and grow, like the word is gift, and I just
Mhm.
learning that through my coach. So I think it's been this applied, like growing and learning. I don't think I grew up in a household of that. Feedback was more of like, I don't, more of an attack or whatever.
Uh,
So that's what comes up is like, for gosh, almost 20 years now, applying that feedback as a gift and really embracing that. So that's one side of the response. The other is, I remember two distinct situations when you started to talk about this. I remember two situations. One, there was someone that was on my team, and one day he said, well, if you would lead. And I was like, if I would lead, wait, what? And it, like, I can't. And the situation we were in, you know, I definitely wasn't using ands, I was using buts. He, was not owning in my opinion, was not owning his role as a leader to, go to take and own what we were working on. It was more of looking for all of this direction for me, when ultimately, like, this is yours to own. That's the way I was seeing it. But
mhm.
he came and he said, well, if you would lead, something like that. And man, it took me a while. That got me, talk about nervous system explosion. And then another situation a couple of years ago, as we were developing People Forward Network, there was a guest on my podcast who, in a debrief call, he said, would you be willing to take some feedback? And it wasn't about the episode or anything. It was about he's a brand specialist, and then he looked up things about PFN and myself, and really challenged who PFN is, like from a, but is this really who you are? And I mean, and so it's like the mix of identity and values, because PFN is
Mhm,
such a values play as well.
mhm.
But he's like, you aren't showing up that way from a thought leader perspective to stand for these things or something like that. Not that I wasn't, it was more of a, well, you need to raise your, I don't know, platform. If this is really what you stand for, you need to stand for it a lot louder, because basically I see nothing about that online for you, or I don't know.
Mm,
And I was like, whoa. I mean, it took me a while. Like I think I had to shift. It took me a week to get in a better place, because I would say depression set in a little bit. Like it
yeah.
really, and then I had to
Mm.
discern, wait, I barely know you. And wow, do you have some kahunas to say this, and then to
Uh-huh.
appreciate that he brought that. It was a lot. So those two things are in my identity world coming up.
Yeah, I think it's so I mean, for me, feedback is not normal for me it's I really still have to practice my response to it. And you and I were talking on I was driving home from the gym this morning. We were doing a little talk before we hopped on today. And you said, those first 1 to 7 years of life or so, they are so formative. They really do create a lot of our hardwired response. And if I think of life between, ages 0 to 7, feedback to your point of like what happened at home, it came in the form of criticism and walking on eggshells and kind of being like, oh. And so, feedback, if I'm not in a conscious state, if the unconscious part of me is the one that's hearing, feedback feels like I'm in trouble.
Mhm.
It feels like I disappointed somebody. It really hooks the child within me, because feedback can feel like a parent to child conversation.
Mhm.
So, in a conscious state, and by the way, for me, a conscious state means like, am I doing this shit to make me feel good? Like, did I work out today? Did I meditate today? Did I spend 5 minutes with spirit at least, so that I am anchored in who I am truly, and I'm not anchored in a dysregulated nervous system. When my
Mm.
nervous system is dysregulated, I can tell you, I probably don't take any of those things very well. When I'm
Mhm.
doing the work to connect with mind, body, spirit first thing in the day, then I will handle those things so much better. So much
So
better. And I think,
interesting. Yes.
yeah. Do
So
you sense that
interesting
for
that
you
you're saying
too?
that. What'd you say?
You sense that for you too? Like,
Oh,
the more
yes.
regulated you are?
100%. So originally when you were starting to say that, I'm like, this is where it connects to how we start our day, to be
Mhm,
grounded going into our day and centered in who we are, right? Like that's how this applies, because whatever's going to come up, we want to stand in our best self for those responses that we bring. And in those two situations, Amy, I was in a tough season of life,
mm,
and it's just so interesting to think about that with the person that said, well, if you would lead, we were in a really just a tough, challenging, misaligned team state, not across everybody. It just wasn't, we were not in a flow state at that time. And then when I think about the other situation with the guy that was the guest, I know that just that I was so off during that time. And it's just interesting, talk about law of attraction. It's like, I'm attracting some of that as well, but then not ready to handle that. I was fragile in
mhm,
those two situations. I was like fragile human.
mm.
So the way that it was taken, no matter what, if that was shared with me today, it would still be hard. Those are hard things to hear. But the way I would come back, hopefully with an and, um, I think I could do that a lot better,
Yeah.
just because of the state I'm in.
I think that's so helpful for us to reflect too, of like, feedback is a gift for us to give it as well. And there's times that we will avoid having tough conversations or even advocating for what we need, telling people what we need, out of fear of, I don't want to create the feelings in them that I have when somebody gives me feedback or accountability or whatever, right? So I think the what's coming to mind for me is like, A, are you taking care of yourself and getting yourself in a good spot so that you can face whatever challenges might face you today? Being human's a challenge. Like there's a lot of shit thrown at us, you know? So are we doing that? Number two is do we have trust built when we're having these conversations? That's going to make such a big difference in how people hear it. If somebody I trust deeply, like if you were to provide me feedback and say, hey, can I share blah, blah, blah? Like, I know that you care about me deeply. I know you love me enough to share truth with me. And I would be grateful. Even if it was like hurtful to hear, I would know that you weren't trying to hurt me, that you
Mhm.
loved me. Right. So
Yeah.
that relationship of trust is something else to take into account, whether we're the ones providing the feedback or not, or avoiding the feedback or whatever. I think that's so helpful for us to reflect on. And then
Oh, well,
also
I'll
like,
share with you,
go ahead.
Amy, just real quick. I have a conversation that I have been dragging, like it's on the list. I've had a few shots to have this conversation with someone that I really care about. And I have a coach that I had shared this, what I want to talk about with this person. And that coach, who knows me really well and total like trust and love, she said, I can't believe you have not had this conversation, like the way that she said it. And I'm like, I know. And she's like, why? And I'm like, ah, I just, I feel like I don't want to send them into a spiral. Like, I just know that what I need to share with them is really important for them and their family. And I can see that I can help, and she's like, okay, you're going to have this conversation with them by next Friday. Okay. So then last Friday, I was supposed to check in and have this conversation. Well, this person had been sick last week. And, when I talked with them, they were just in a really rough, and I was like, I can't do it. So I'm dragging because maybe I might hurt their identity. Like of these
Mm,
three, it's not a values thing. It's not a security thing. It's an identity. And this person is like they are seeing the world. There's just so much opportunity, and I need to be a leader and talk with them about it. And I need to do it this week. So
mm, mhm. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to check back in with you and see how that went. By the way, do you know what else? Okay. Here's what I just want to point out. Um, Anybody listening, if you happen to know Nikki personally, was there a second where you're like, "Oh my God, is it me?" Because have you that's the thing with ego, is like it wants to anticipate a potential threat. So by the way, if anybody on here is listening and you had a split second thought of like, "Oh my God, is it me? Is she talking to me?" Just know it's just your ego trying to protect you. And that's why these conversations are so important. It doesn't make us bad, it just makes us human. And I think to be like, oh, how human of me. And then to invite in a more conscious lens, And also to your point, like, let's say these work related things moving into personal, like if our personal life is struggling, and we may not know that about somebody, but like if we're struggling in our relationship, if we feel like we're not being seen or heard, or we have unmet needs in our personal life, if we are having trouble with boundaries in family, man, there's so many things people deal with in their home life that we have no idea the battles they're fighting. It
mhm,
could be it could be money issues, health issues, addiction. We truly do not know.
mhm,
And I think that having that compassion, when we're having tough conversations, there's a phrase that is from A Course in Miracles. I really try to repeat when I get myself too certain, like too certain that I understand, oh, well, they're trying to do, and then like if my ego starts to do that, then I repeat the phrase, I don't know anything about them.
mhm,
And even if I feel like I do, like it just invites in curiosity to be like, there's likely a lot of stuff happening that I have no idea about. I have no idea about. It's very easy to kind of villainize, someone whose life we don't truly understand.
mhm. That's really
So,
good.
yeah, that's certainly something I try to keep in mind, and in those personal interactions, with any of the issues that we might deal with. Back to that identity, values, and security. Like if we're not getting what we need out of our relationships, or if we're not feeling seen, or if we're having a hard time connecting with our kids, or, maybe, I mean, fill in the blank. Like I think it's helpful for us to reflect on our personal life and to see where are there maybe challenging conversations that we're avoiding, because of the fear of the identity or the security,
Mhm.
or to admit that there's a values misalignment. I think that's interesting to reflect upon.
Amy, I think you could speak into something that just popped in my head around this separating self from situation.
Mm,
So during these challenging conversations, maybe some tough feedback or whatever, right? We're talking about the action, the behavior, not to be our worth,
mm,
and just reminding us all that those are two different things,
they
you know?
are. Yeah. Identity role is something that, I learned in my Sandler days, but it wasn't created by Sandler. It's often taught there. And so Eckhart Tolle talks about this, creating that separation, having a really, really good relationship with your identity, being, your mind, body, soul, having a solid relationship with this thing that you are stuck with every second of every day for your entire life that you can never escape. And then separating the what you do from who you are, right? So to your point, yeah, the behavior, the actions, um, it does not mean you are a good or bad person. That is something that's completely separate. But I think the challenge within that is that many of us believe our identity and our worthiness is based on our outcomes.
Mhm.
And so that's a deeper, more conscious conversation within ourselves of, you know, if everything I did and provided went away, what's the value still left within me? And our value is inherent and it is never changing and it comes with us into this lifetime and it leaves with us when we go. And so really building a strong connection with that so that we can separate, what we do from who we are.
Mm. And you just said something that reminds me of an Amy-ism that I or remember there's so many Amy-isms that I channel for myself, but one is the only person that is with you from the time you're born until the time you die is you. And so remembering that the most important work you can do is on yourself, like loving yourself. If we don't love ourselves and nourish ourselves and pour into ourselves and do this kind of like work, just think about the life experience that we miss in the dash of the life that we live from the time we are here. And
Mhm.
so I think sometimes people borderline consider that selfish, but it's the most selfless thing you can do because of how then you show up for the world and for others. And just so important to prioritize.
Yeah, completely. It really can be. I think the process that I'll share, kind of the steps, of when we're in these challenging situations, whether it's one we're avoiding having and we need the courage to get into it, or whether it's one that we're maybe blindsided by, or just triggers are hit because we're scrolling on social media and we read the damn comments, and the comments will get you every freaking time. It is okay. Step one, regulate. A regulated nervous system helps regulate our thinking. We can come from a higher, more conscious place when we're regulated. I think another piece that's really helpful is leading with curiosity, like just being like, I'm seeking to understand. I'm seeking to understand because the ego needs to be right and the ego needs to be heard. We're inviting in a higher consciousness when we invite in curiosity. Separating the person from the position, like we were just talking about, right? Like there's the human and then there's the action, and those two things can be separate from each other. I think that's incredibly important. And I think going in with like what's the most ideal solution, like what is the ideal outcome here? If the goal is I just need to be right and I need them to hear me, then we know that we are completely coming from an egoic place. But if the goal is to get to some common understanding, compassion, clarity, then it's going to require us to act differently. And I mean, I'm telling you, I challenge myself with this all the time. It's really letting love lead. Like that's often what's missing, you know? When conversations get hard, I think let love become the practice.
Mhm.
And if we can lean into that, a loving practice, then our belief systems, our actions, and a greater consciousness can all stem from that place when we move beyond fear and move into love.
What would love do?
What would love do? Yes. Okay. Awesome. Well, next week we're off. I will be in Costa Rica hosting our annual High
Yay.
Vibe Tribe retreat. But when we get back, I get excited to share all the goodness, all the lessons learned from our time away. And so I'll see you in a couple weeks or chat with you in a
Can't
couple weeks.
wait. Have such a wonderful time. I'll be there
Thank
in spirit.
you. Thank you.
Take
All
care,
right.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.